Good evening. It's 6 o'clock and I'd like to call this committee of the whole to order on January 14th. We'll start with call to order, please, and attendance by Clerk Snare.
Mayor Zabian.
He's going to be approximately 20 minutes late. Good evening. It's 6 o'clock and I'd like to call this committee of the whole to order on January 14th. We'll start with call to order, please, and attendance by Clerk Snare.
Bear with me. Mayor Zabian.
He's going to be approximately 20 minutes late. Good evening. It's 6 o'clock and I'd like to call this committee of the whole to order on January 14th. Please, and attendance by Clerk Snare. Mayor Zabian.
I've already done it. I did. There. Okay. We're good. Yeah, it's just the volume on YouTube was turned on. Apologies for that. We're good. Let's start again. Mayor Zabian. Councillor Yonich.
Here.
Councillor Scott McLean has sent regrets, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Remy. Here. Councillor Whedon.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Debbie Francis.
Here.
Councillor Bob Morton.
Present.
Councillor Larry Pinch.
Present.
Councillor Paul Morton.
Present.
Councillor John Smith.
Present.
Councillor Bonnie Smith.
Here.
Councillor Ivy.
Present.
Thank you, Clerk Snare. Now that we've got that all behind us, we'll move on to approval of the agenda, including any additions or deletions. Councillor Ivy?
Yeah, I just wanted to check. We don't have a financial report, which we normally see at committee of the whole. Are we changing that, or is it any reason that we're seeing it show up at council as opposed to?
CAO?
Thank you. I'm not sure if the director, you had mentioned that or not, but we're looking for a little more leeway between the month end. So yes, we were looking to transition those to council meetings versus committee of the whole, so we can have a little bit more accuracy, especially with forecasting. It might be able to close the current month or the previous month so that you have more accurate numbers.
Okay, thank you very much. And also we've got a report on there from planning, which is the committee's recommendation to council, which normally would go straight to council. Is there a reason we have that showing up at committee of the whole, which is somewhat unusual?
CAO?
No comment on that. I think we were just looking to have a bit more debate with council on that one, but that could be deferred to council if that's their wishes. Yes, so I guess, yes, you're right. I'm sorry, I didn't pick up on that.
Just looking to understand it. It is still end up going to council in any event, so I'm fine with it here and discussion. That's fine. It's intended to be a discussion item, so that's great. So thank you for that. I think that's it for me on agenda items. Thank you.
Councillor Ivy, are we deleting 14E, MGA and personnel matters?
Thank you. I was thrown off by the, well, there's an excuse, but yeah, thank you. Removing the last item on the in camera. Thank you.
Okay, just wanted to confirm. Councillor Smith, John Smith. Oh, you're good? Okay, no other additions or deletions? I'll look for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Paul Morton. Is there seconded by Councillor Bob Morning? All those in favor? Do it by hands, yeah. Motion passed. Okay, declarations, conflict of interest. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to announcements. West Hants Regional Municipality is in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is governed by the treaties of peace and friendship signed in 1726. West Hants Regional Municipality recognizes we are all treaty people and have responsibilities to this land and each other. West Hants Regional Municipality also recognizes African Nova Scotian are distinct people whose history, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kmaq known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. Council, I do have one announcement on Thursday evening, January 16th at the 3 Mile Plains Hall from 6:30 to 8 p.m. There's an equity and anti-racism presentation. So we are encouraging residents to stop by. Again, it's anywhere from 6:30 to 8. If you cannot stop in, there is a survey online. So if you could do that, that would be great. Is there any other announcements from council? Councillor Ivy?
Thank you, Chair. Just note, because I think the way our council meeting falls later in the month, that the Long Pond Classic is back, coming up on the 25th of January. I understand their banquet event is sold out, which is a tremendous thing, but folks are still welcome to get out to Long Pond to see what I believe they have 4 or 5 former NHL stars coming into play, and always a great event. So just as a heads up on that, I think the Avon Chamber is also doing an event on the same date, Robert Burns Day, unless that's been changed, I'm not sure. And then the WTPA is doing, the Windsor Township Business Association is doing a post-Christmas social, for which notices would have been in emails for members and the like. So just to be aware that that's this Thursday as well.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Ivy. Nothing else? We'll move on. Approval of previous minute meetings for 2024-1203 Committee of the Whole minutes. They were in your package, so looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Paul Morton, seconded by Director Councillor Larry Pinch.
Uh,
And Councillor Ivy.
Thank you. 2 items for correction in there, if I could.
Yep.
One is on item, it's underneath the, I've got it noted here. It's underneath the approval of the minutes. I think we say that we approve the agenda. So it's a wording change to be corrected there. If we can get that adjusted or amended. And then on item 8H, which was underneath the PVSC conversation that we had, it looks like we started a sentence and we didn't finish it. It's around the tail end of the discussion. It says NSFM and FCM, and then it just stops and it carries. And I've looked at it and listened to it, and I don't think there'd be any harm in simply striking the reference. It was discussion around them being good advocates, but I think that's in the intent and meaning of the words. And so I think the cleanest thing is that we can just strike that, and that'll clean that up.
Okay, so noted. Is there anything else? I'll call for the question. So all those in favor of the minutes as amended? Hands up. Motion carried. So now we have 3 presentations tonight, and we're going to start with Dial-A-Ride presentation with Kim Fahey and Nancy, and I'll ask you girls to come up, please. You have the 15 minutes as we discussed, and please introduce yourself and just click the like, Kim. Yep, thanks.
Hi, I'm the Executive Director at the Family Resource Center of West Hants.
I'm the coordinator for West Hants Dial-A-Ride.
Right. Great. Oh, perfect. So West Hants Dial-A-Ride is a project of the Family Resource Center of West Hants, and Dial-A-Ride provides affordable door-to-door transportation for anybody, any clients living within the municipality of the West Hants that have any transportation barriers at all. Dial-A-Ride has 3 wheelchair accessible vans, 1 electric vehicle, as well as volunteer drivers that use their own vehicles to offer transportation to clients within the area. Dial-A-Ride picks clients up in the municipality of West Hants and can take them anywhere that they need to go within the province. Can I move? No. So the next slide. Oh, right. Okay. Transportation has been a conversation in the West Hants area for a very long time. Many surveys show that transportation is one of the #1 barriers for residents within the area to get to anywhere that they need to go, whether it's to stay within the area or to move within the province. with no public transportation services for the residents, Dollaride works very hard to try to remove these barriers in the community. The transportation that Dollaride offers may still not be affordable to some. Some of the reasons for our services may be required are that an individual may not feel comfortable driving themselves out of the area. So anybody that may need transportation from the municipality that needs to go into, say, Halifax for any reason, mostly health. A lot of the individuals, even if they have their own vehicle, don't feel comfortable, driving into the city, especially now with construction and how busy things are. They may require a wheelchair vehicle. The health may restrict them from driving, and the costs that are associated with the vehicle between insurance and gas and things like that, maintenance. According to the 2021 census, Windsor West Hants has a population of 22,934 individuals. And we all know that the municipality has been growing significant since the census were taken. Especially over the last few years, there's been an influx, we know, of individuals. So for many living on a fixed income, transportation is not something they are able to afford. Many residents may not be able to get to medical appointments, shopping, social activities, and more. And we feel that most people have, or all residents should have the ability to be able to get where they need to go. Dollaride is the only means of accessible transportation in the municipality of West Hants. However, we also provide transportation to anyone who faces barriers to getting where they need to go. Dollaride on average provides 600 to 700 drives a month. So we are requesting to remain aligned on the budget with an increased amount per year from what we have received in the past. These funds provide the people of the West Hants Regional Municipality subsidized drives. In 2010, the municipality felt they had many gaps and challenges they wanted to fix. Let's start by reducing poverty, increasing food securities, and allowing everyone to participate in their community. And it all starts with affordable transportation. With your supports, Dollaride can provide reduced rates for accessing the food bank, social isolation, wheelchair accessible drives, single parents, low income families and individuals, and those going to school, work, or other appointments. Others, and also for drives for others that identify a need for support with transportation. And that's a presentation from us.
Thank you, Kim. I'll open it up to council now if there's any questions for Kim or Nancy on the presentation. Counselor Bonnie Smith.
When you say you provide a reduced rate, does that mean everyone gets the same reduced rate, or is it based on someone's income?
So it depends. Like if somebody that we have a conversation with that calls in for a drive, if they have a need, like they'll usually let us know what's happening. So if like we don't ask for somebody's income, like we don't say like what's your what's your annual income. If we ask if there's a need and there's a need that we know of, then yes, we offer subsidized rides to those individuals. So most of the time people aren't going to, you know what I mean? Like most individuals that we're driving, there's a need for subsidy, right?
Okay.
Yep. So we try not to put that barrier too, because then that can be an added barrier.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we don't subsidize drives for anyone that would have other means of having their transportation paid for example, income assistance, veterans affairs, or there's the programs through the Cancer Society. It's called the BTO program. So there's different programs that people get subsidy for the drives as well, or full on paid for. So we don't subsidize anything like that. It's just an individual, like, for example, if I needed transportation and I didn't qualify for any programs, then I would call and request a drive, that's who would get the subsidy. So it's,
Mhm.
we don't subsidize any other government programs. Just actual individuals paying for their own transportation.
Nice. Okay,
Is that good? Or another, or a follow-up?
I have another.
Go
question.
ahead.
Do you provide drives on weekends and evenings as well? Or is
Weekend,
it-
yes.
It's all time. Okay,
Based on availability or need.
okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Great. Counselor John Smith?
Thank you, Deputy. I was just curious about where people are going, and I wanted to know if you categorize where these drives are, whether they're to medical appointments in Halifax, or whether they're local, whether they're to the grocery store or
I would say
pharmacy,
probably-
or
sorry.
is there like an annual report where you would have all these statistics, or?
We do.
Quarterly report that we have to report. So we have a quarterly report that actually shows where people are picked up and where they're going to.
Hmm.
And what the reason is too.
So of the 600 or 700 drives a year, how many would be going to Halifax? A
That's
month?
yeah.
Okay. How many would go to
How many would go to
Halifax? Yeah.
I would say probably 70% of our transportation is to other parts of the province for medical transportation. We could be going to Yarmouth, Middleton,
Pemble.
Pemble, Uminus, Halifax,
Wolfville.
Dartmouth, Wolfville. Because with our funding, we're not allowed to drive individuals that are not in wheelchairs right in the Windsor West Hants area. So we couldn't pick an individual up at Sobeys or say or the crossing and take them to Sobeys. Like, we're not allowed to do that with our funding.
Right, right.
If
And
they
we-
were in a wheelchair, we can because there's no other service available, but. With the with our utility and review board licensing, sorry, I said funding, we're not allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Counselor Bob Smith?
Yeah,
Bob
thank you.
Morton, sorry.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy. Currently a line item, and I believe, is it 30? Is it 30,000 a year?
I do believe it's
Everything.
30.
Yeah, 30,000 a year.
A year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, the answer is gonna be as much as you can give, but ideally, you must have a number, a magic number in mind that you're hoping is the line item. Obviously, $1 million would be great.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
no,
The more, put it this way, the more funding that we have, the more
drives. we
the
can
more
subsidize.
drives we can subsidize for the individuals in the Windsor West Hants municipality.
That makes sense. If I could,
Right?
Deputy, just one more
Yes.
follow-up.
Definitely, yeah.
Out of those 600 to 700, are they all subsidized? Like, no.
No.
Okay.
No.
No.
What would a normal rate be? Like from here to Halifax, if it wasn't subsidized?
If it wasn't subsidized and we were billing an organization, I would say probably we bill at 51 cents a kilometer for regular non-wheelchair accessible drive. So I would say it'd be around $85, $90 if we were billing an organization like Department of Community Services or Veterans Affairs or say the BTO program. Now, if an individual's paying themselves, normally we would charge $75. But with a subsidized rate to take someone from Windsor to Halifax, not in a wheelchair accessible van, it would be $45 with the subsidy.
Yeah.
To take them down, wait for them, and then bring them back. They don't pay for parking, they don't pay for bridge, they don't pay for any of that. They dropped off at the door, we wait for them. They come out, they call when they're finished, we take them home.
Very good. Awesome.
And also, if somebody did call and there was a bigger need than the $45, then we're not gonna refuse somebody a drive because they can't afford the 45. Or if it's something that like, if we have somebody that might have to go 6 times or something, like you say, $45 a time is not a lot of money, but then you add that times 10, it can be a lot for somebody. So with those conversations are conversations that we have that, we work through those kinds of pieces. So
Okay,
we
Counselor
try not
Ivory.
to refuse anybody.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the ladies with Dial-A-Ride. I think we may have started this, it might have been close to 3 years ago.
It was.
Was it 3 years ago? So, and I think at that time, we may have had a report that may have shown some of your statistics and I sort of recall that there was a primary pickup location was in the more urban centers of West Hants. We were asking about the ability to see if that could be expanded out and so forth. Do we have the ability to get an update on report, like a comparison to see what kind of growth has taken place in that over the last, what would be the last 3 years, I guess, just to see if we've been able to move the yardsticks on that for getting
You
more
mean on
people.
what, us picking up outside of the,
Yes,
yeah,
because the numbers I think were they were lower in the more rural areas of the region. And I think it was kind of an objective of council to see if we're able to see that number move at all. It'd just be helpful to know. And if we haven't, then what can we do to try and find ways to further expand or to do broader reach with the service that you provide that is so important for the people in the area. I don't happen to have it, but you may be able to do a like for comparable. It's an easy thing to do that can be circulated. I'm guessing you deal with finance primarily on this.
Yes,
I'm not
we do.
sure.
Yeah, and we send a spreadsheet that shows each area that the drive is being picked up in and where they're going to. Like on that spreadsheet, it would show like if we picked up in Brooklyn and we took to Halifax, it would actually show on those spreadsheets on
That's-
where the funding is going.
Right. Okay. It would be helpful, I think, just,
Yep.
from a council standpoint to see the numbers. So, but that's great. Thank you for the service that you do.
Counselor Remy.
Through you, Chair. I was just curious, and I apologize, but are you guys all volunteer based? So it's volunteer drivers?
We have volunteer drivers and we also have four paid drivers that drive our vehicles. So the vehicles that we own. So we own 3 wheelchair accessible vehicles and 1 electric vehicle. So we have paid drivers that drive those because they're ours. Those are our response. So then the other individuals that we have, they drive they're volunteers and they drive their own vehicles. So we have paid drivers that are paid by Dollar Ride, Family Resource Center. And then we have the volunteer drivers who are paid per kilometer to reimburse their mileage.
Amazing. Thank you.
Counselor Paul Martin.
Just a quick question. Last time we spoke, you guys having problems with the electric vehicle, the battery? Did it ever get resolved? So it's fine now?
Yep, everything is good now. Yep. And we have our own, before we only had a like the regular plug-in charger. So we have a level 2 charging system now. So that is a game changer as well.
Great. Any other questions? I just have one, Kim. So what is the growth from last year to this year? Like if you're doing 600 to 700, the year before, how many would you have been approximately doing?
I would say probably 5 to 6 a month, 450 to 6 a month.
Okay. So it is increasing. That's
I
great.
find it does increase every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
So
And we found a big increase after COVID too, because we were offering through the program that the government was subsidizing. There was free COVID vaccinations, and that kind of put the publicity, I think, out too for Dollar Ride. So it's gotten out there a lot more. Like we're seeing a lot more transportation, I think, since that piece. So, and the demands too. And like I said, a lot of our calls are people who don't want to drive into the city if they're going for medical appointments. And like I say, whether it's because they don't have the capacity or it's because of the fact that their health too, right? Like to drive into the city if you're having a treatment of any kind and then have to drive home, it's exhausting. So we're seeing a lot more of that too.
I just want to add too, that I thought of it to your question about the volunteer drivers. We did have more volunteer drivers than we do now, but our funders, they're pushing more towards going with our own vehicles. So they've provided through the Rural Transit Solutions Fund, they've provided 80% of the transportation costs for fully electric or hybrid vehicles. And then the Accessible Transportation Assistance Fund through the Nova Scotia government has provided the other 20%. So basically we didn't have to pay anything for the vehicles that we received because we received 80% from the federal government, 20% from the provincial government. So we have a lot more of our, well, not a lot, but we have more of our own drivers now than we did before.
We expanded our fleet. So with
Yes.
the expansion of our fleet, we don't.
But we were able to do that because we received funding for those vehicles.
great. Thank you very much. Seeing no more lights. Thank you for the presentation. I'm sure we'll have a conversation at budget time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving along to 7B, Hantsport Memorial Community Center, and we have Nick Zamora. Come on up, Nick. Again, as we spoke, you have your 15 minutes and just turn your light on and to speak into. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Francis. CAO and Council, thank you for having me here this evening. I'm Nick Zamora. I'm president of the Hansport Memorial Community Center. I believe we have a presentation coming up. I just wanted to ask sort of before we start, how many councilors are familiar with the Hansport Memorial Community Center, just by a show of hands? Okay. And how many of you have visited the property? Beautiful. Okay. I just want to get a sense of how much this is really introductory or kind of review or just background information. And a lot of what I will present tonight is the evolution sort of the relationship between the community center in Hansport and the municipality and the former town of Hansport, and how that sort of has evolved into where we are now, and what we as a board offer to the community and the broader community of West Hants. And you can see on the slide that's showing there, this is an 18-acre property in the center of Hansport. And you can see just kind of up the middle where all those trees are. This was originally an estate. It was a shipbuilder's mansion. You can see at the very center there. That is Churchill House. It's not a registered historical site, but it's a 1860s mansion. And just behind that to the right on the slide is a barn or a carriage house that we now use for some of our programming. You can see the 3 baseball fields and the track around it and the tennis courts. And this is an old photo, and I'll apologize for some of this. I had to pull together rather quickly for this presentation, and it's from a previous presentation that we made to council, but it is relevant. And so the way that this organization, I guess, came into existence was back in 1948. The property came up for sale, and a community group sort of did some community consultation and got in touch with the town, and there wasn't much recreational space in the area. And so what they came up with was that they formed a board at the time and purchased a property for the town to have some recreational space. And it didn't look like it does now at that time. It's been developed over decades since 1948. One of the first things was the pool that you can see, sort of the blue thing at the top of that picture. And then just over time, they started adding amenities and things to the property, and it has sort of always been open to the public and just a recreational space. And over time, they put together like a staff team and develop programming and things like that. And it essentially solely exists to offer recreational space and programming opportunities to members of the public. And that started as Hansport, and now it's evolved into the broader municipality of West Hants. So over time, in the beginning, it was a really close-knit relationship between the town and the board and HMCC as an organization. And I'm just going back to the first page here, but originally, like since the early 70s, there was tax money sort of given to this organization to upkeep the property and allow programming to happen. And in order for that to happen at the time, they had to do plebiscites, and they had to consult the public and make sure that people wanted their tax money to go to this organization for those reasons. And those passed year over year, and until 2003. At that time, it was $36,000 per year was going to the community center for maintenance and programming and things like that. And then in 2006, there was a new agreement formed with the town that the town would sort of just, instead of giving the money to the community center, the town of Hansport at the time would just do the labor and the upkeep of the grounds and things like that. And sort of directly after that time, the former town of Hantsport began to struggle, I guess, to keep up with those demands. And fast forward, I guess, to 2015, when the town had to dissolve. That's when Hantsport became part of the municipality of West Hants. So I'm just kind of giving a background of how this all evolved. So at that time, we had to figure out, because Hantsport at that time had sort of an all-in tax rate. It was $1.66, and it wasn't super clear what was going where. They just had, as a small, nimble town, they would just have staff come up and do things at the center. It wasn't necessarily always sort of outlined in the budget how much they would spend each year on this. So at the time of dissolution, where we started a relationship with this municipality, we had to come up with a dollar amount of what that costs. So we tried to line out everything. So we're talking about plowing and mowing and all the general maintenance of the property, keeping up the driveways, and tree trimming and everything that you can think of an 18-acre property. And we came up with a dollar amount that was about $56,000. And I will say that we didn't think of everything at the time, but through discussions with West Hants staff at the time, the best course of action was to develop an area rate policy that didn't exist at the time, whereby we would consult the residents of the former town of Hantsport to ask them basically if they would be willing to continue to contribute the same amount of their tax dollars to the maintenance of the community center. Sorry if this is getting convoluted, but it's that's how it went. So we went to the public. We put out letters to every single resident, and we had a meeting, and we asked for the support, and people ended up voting 92.7% in favor of doing that. So the municipality was able to, through that process, collect taxes from just the town of Hantsport and remit that basically to the community center for the upkeep that was always happening through the town. So that was quite a process. And we learned a lot from that, and we're very grateful for that having happened, and the municipality developing that and allowing us to go through that process. And since then, we have formed a great relationship with the West Hants municipality, and to the point where we now have a full-time rec director there that works closely with West Hants staff. And this property is widely available to everybody in West Hants. It's located in Hantsport, but it's an 18-acre purely recreational property. Many of the assets are available free of charge to come and use. The playground, the tennis and pickleball courts, there's clubs that use them, but there's also like 75% of the time is open to the public for things like that. The basketball courts, the leash-free dog park is a huge asset to the municipality, I believe, and it's widely used, and it's no charge. You just go and take your dog and use it. So we feel that, or we exist to do that. The board's mandate is to provide recreational opportunities and facilities to the public. So this slide is from an earlier presentation, and this is what we used. This is what we originally came up with for the costs of sort of operating the HMCC facilities. And I have highlighted insurance because that has gone up over double since we had this, and everything else has gone up, not double, but everything else as everything else in the world has increased since then. I do come with an ask tonight, and the next few slides are about sort of what we offer to the public, and I want to sort of illustrate that we're not coming just with our hands out as an ask. We are a board of 17 right now. Many of those board members are second generation board members with parents that have served on the board before. And I think there's at least one that's third generation. And there are many of us that have a third generation that are taking part in programs, and that are some of them have been employees at HMCC. And so there's a strong culture and a strong interest in the board in continuing to have this offered to the public as what it was for us when we kind of grew up. I include myself in a second iteration of that. I've been president for 10 years now. So summer day camps was the previous slide, but we had over 1,000 day camp days provided. So between 25 and 30 kids a day all summer, and they get to experience the whole grounds when they come to the day camps. We have phenomenal staff that are local youth that are employed there. They get to swim in the pool every day if they want to, and they get to use all of the grounds and experience that. The next slide is the pool. We had over 450 youth take swimming lessons at the pool this summer. That's been growing year after year. And we had a grant that allowed us to offer free swims every afternoon to anybody that wanted to come and swim in the pool, which, by the way, is the oldest still operating outdoor pool in Nova Scotia, built in 1953. The next slide, I'm just noticing my time here, but just to illustrate there's a pretty large playground on the property. I mentioned the dog park and the pickleball and tennis facility that's there that is just recently been upgraded and refurbished, and a new building renovated and rebuilt there too. So that's a beautiful facility. This is just some of the sort of one-off programming that we offer from time to time. So kids programs, senior programs, a haunted house all through Halloween time. It's decorated for all through Christmas time. And we have like a community Christmas dinner there, basketball programs and things, just using the whole property. And then we have, this summer we had 20 employees. Most of them, if not all, are local youth, not just Hansport, but throughout West Hants and the Valley. But we employ 20 we had this summer, and they're all learning, and they've been phenomenal, and really added a sense of community to the area, and been able to offer great programming for younger kids in the area. Churchill House, as I mentioned, is a mansion we've had to spend some considerable amounts of money to keep it up, but it is a beautiful mansion if you've never been inside. And that is used now for community events, weddings, celebrations of life, even just community meetings, training seminars. We've had music play in there. It's a pretty unique music venue. Okay, so all of this, an 18-acre property and everything that I've been talking about is quite costly to upkeep, and the programs that we offer, we have to hire staff, and we have to buy supplies and things like that. So this is just a list of things that are not included in the area rate that I mentioned before, that the Hansport taxpayers pay for just the grounds maintenance. This is everything else, and includes everything on that list. I'm just noticing my time, but everything from heating the house to just minor upkeep of the house and the pool and all of those things that allow us to offer recreational programs and infrastructure to the community. We have a huge Canada Day celebration every year that brings in between 3,000 and 5,000 every July 1st to Hansport. Just things that seem small, but telephone and internet was 4,600 last year. The audit fee for us to have all of our finances audited so that we can submit those to qualify for the area rate is $5,500. And that figure that's just below what's on the screen there, 158,000, doesn't include the insurance and doesn't include, there's a 10% admin fee on the area rate that we qualify for. That's another $5,300. So that's on top of the 158,000. And I'm just have 37 seconds left. This one is just, we have capital costs, and the point of this is that the board is more than willing and super happy to welcome the opportunity to welcome West Hants residents. West Hants is growing, and that means more people hopefully coming all through the municipality, but also to our grounds. We welcome that, but we do have infrastructure needs, and we can't focus on those with the operational costs that we have to do what we're doing. We have no ability to put money away and build towards everything that's on that list. So I'm here and just through going through these figures, 75,000 in operational funding would allow us to alleviate some of the yearly costs that allow us to offer things that we offer. And I've listed things those are also on the previous page, but these are things that would make sense for a municipality to support. I would position this as sort of a satellite recreational center for your municipality. It's not owned by West Hants, but it is available to everybody in the public. So it's a fairly unique relationship. It's a fairly unique facility, and it is historical. It has a historic relationship through the town of Hantsport and now with West Hants, that the board feels it's within reason to ask for some support here so that we can focus on the infrastructure needs that we have. We do have the ability to leverage grant opportunities and things we're a registered charity. So we really want to try to focus on those things. We're finding it really difficult to do with all the operational costs that we have. Sorry, I went over my time a little bit there.
You're good, all good. Thank you for the detailed presentation. Now I'll open it up to counselors for any questions for Nick. Counselor Larry Pinch.
Through you, Chair. Is the only grant funding that you received in last year's operational calendar from Community Cultures, Tourism, Heritage for the Public Swim, or did you receive other grant contributions?
We received, we definitely received more than just that from Communities, Culture, and Heritage for some other programming that we do. We also received an accessibility grant that was included for the accessible washroom that's in the new tennis court building there. We received another provincial grant for repairs to the house that were necessary as a community building. So the soffits all needed to be repaired and things like that. We have received federal grants in the past. We definitely received like Canada Summer Jobs grants federally, and also a provincial. It's the Nova Scotia Skill Program. So that's for I think we got 3 for summer staff that qualify for that grant as well. So we're constantly searching for grants from all levels, definitely.
Great. Counselor Paul Morton.
So it's a good presentation. Thanks, Nick. So I'm sure we'll fire it back to budget time and have a big old discussion on it then.
Sounds great.
Counselor John Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. Can you just explain just quickly what the Red Barn restoration is?
So that barn is actually, as far as we can tell, might be older than the house by a few years, and we've been using it. It's not condemned, but it's the main floor is the only usable floor right now. It has 2 other floors above that are not usable. We have operated like day camps out of the main floor, but it's not insulated. It's not heated. It's not it needs a paint job at the very least, but some of the siding and the sills need repair. We did redo the roof, so it's not leaky or anything like that, but it needs if we're gonna make it into a modern building that's gonna actually serve the community, we could do so much more with it. It's a beautiful building. But the idea would be to restore it, like keep the bones of it, but restore everything else. And you know, I think that we went through an exercise, and the proposal would be to sort of lift it and put a new foundation under it and keep the building, and then redo the whole inside and keep it kind of looking the way that it does now, but make it more modern and functional with heat and insulation and things like that.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Counselor Jim Ivey?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nick, for the presentation. I always enjoy going to Hansport. You had the sign up there, but it's the best camp at HMCC. And there's something about the vibe in Hansport that you feel, I don't know about anybody else, but you feel like you've landed in a place where it's summer camp always. And I just mean that, like, around the streets, just, you just feel at home there I can't describe what it is that's special about it, but it is certainly special. And equally special is what gets rolled out through HMCC for a community the size of what you are and what you have and all that goes on there. And so I just want to say that that's a wonderful thing, and it is appreciated for any of us that don't live there whenever we go there to see that.
Thank you.
The primary operating venue for you is out of Churchill House, and I'm guessing that's where your phone and internet is running through. Is that your primary building location where you're?
It is the primary. There is a sort of another office right on Main Street by the digital sign. There's a little building there where the rec director does a lot of his kind of office work down there. So there is internet down there as well. And then we have a cell phone, one cell phone that we use for, we would hire like a summer staff coordinator, and they would take the cell phone during the summer, and then the rec director for the rest of the year.
Right, absolutely. It's just to look at ways. There's ways to assist with capital or operating funding, which is one thing. That's cash out of one organization into another. Then there's what other things can we do where we can cut or reduce costs, because every dollar we can save is a dollar that doesn't have to flow between organizations. So that's kind of where my head is going with some of the things that you folks have here. That is probably a conversation with staff and the like to see what can be done in that regard. But thanks again for the presentation and the great work that gets done through your organization.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Counselor Larry Pinch?
I was just going to highlight, because I think it's something really important that HMCC does, is that your aquatic programs are flexible so they can be private. And from a DEI perspective, that's something that's not as accessible in the rest of the municipality. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that comment. That's something that we had to look at from the town in 2015 was ready to shut the pool. And that's sort of when the board kind of started to change over. And the first thing we wanted to focus on was how do we keep this pool running? So that was out of necessity at the time. How can we do this, decrease costs? And that ended up turning into the model that we have now, which is, we've had a lot of comments like that people love it, and it's more accessible that way.
Great. And seeing no more lights. So thank you, Nick, for the presentation. And I'm sure we'll be seeing something come budget time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move along to our final presentation, Property Valuation Services Center with Paul Beasley and Ron Tremblay. And I'll let them introduce themselves. And again, 15 minutes, and then we'll go to questions from council.
All right, Madam Chair, Your Worship, and councillors, congratulations firstly on your re-elections and election successes. I think you all know who I am. However, I'm the Municipal Account Manager for Property Valuation Services. And as always, it's a pleasure to be here to present this year the 2025 assessment roll to you and take any questions that you may have. I'm going to let Rod introduce himself, but before we begin, or before I pass it to Rod, I want to thank staff as well for having us here tonight and inviting us here as well. So PVSC sent out its press release yesterday in regards to the 2025 roll, and One statement in it I will read. The 2025 assessment roll reflects steady residential market growth, especially in towns outside of Halifax Regional Municipality. Our analysis indicates apartment buildings and manufactured homes are a strong market across the province. So as that relates to West Hants, that holds true because of course you have the two former towns within the municipality, and that's where some of the added growth was this year. So based on that, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to pass it over to Rod to introduce himself and take you through some of the presentation.
Good evening. Do we have a screen share that's gonna go? I feel like I should be able to figure this out, but so I've got it up, but I'm not seeing it up there. Right there. I believe everyone has a copy of this presentation as well. So good evening, Your Worship, Mayor Zebian, councillors and municipal staff, as well as members of the public that are here. As Paul mentions, thanks for allowing us to present this evening and give us a couple of moments of your time to talk a little bit about the work that we've been up to over the past year. I'm Rod Trombley. I'm Director of Residential Appeals and Special Projects with PVSC. And I'm going to walk you through some of the changes to the assessment role and a little bit about what we do. For some folks who've been on council for a while, some of this may be review. So I'm going to try in the essence of time to move forward through some of these slides and allow some time for questions as well. So very briefly, the sort of four-step process of Nova Scotia's property assessment and taxation system. So the government of Nova Scotia establishes assessment legislation. That's the Assessment Act. PVSC assesses the value of property and shares it with municipalities and property owners. So that's done both through the distribution of 650,000 assessment notices annually. Those were mailed yesterday, as well as sharing with our municipal partners as well. Municipalities determine their budget requirements, set municipal tax rates, and collect property taxes to pay for municipal services. So that is where everyone in this room comes in, and property owners pay their property taxes through the billing system. So just a little bit about PVSC. So we are created under the Property Valuation Services Corporation Act of 2006. We're a not-for-profit, municipally funded corporation. We're responsible for assessing all real property in Nova Scotia. That's about 650,000 parcels. We're governed by a 11-person board of directors. 4 of those board members are independent and 1 is non-voting. That's the president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities. And we have approximately 130 employees across 62 communities around Nova Scotia. So we are a work from home organization at this point. And we have local staff throughout the province. So what we do and what we don't do. So we do deliver an assessment roll to all 49 municipalities within the province. It's about 650,000 assessment notices this year, as I mentioned. We administer the capped assessment program on behalf of the province of Nova Scotia, and also the seasonal tourist business designation program on the behalf of the Nova Scotia government. What we don't have the authority to do is set tax rates, collect taxes, create tax policy, provide tax relief, determine land ownership, and I added or boundaries as well. So the last one would be the responsibility of the Nova Scotia Registry of Deeds. The remainder of those would be the responsibility of the municipality who's receiving our information, in this case, West Hants. So the Nova Scotia Assessment Act requires that we assess property at market value. That's, according to the Act, the amount in which the assessor feels would be paid if it were sold on a date prescribed by the director to a willing seller and willing buyer, and the assessment shown on the roll shall be the assessment that reflects the state of the property as existed on the first day of December. The easiest way I always think of it is it's the market 1 year prior to when you're holding that notice in your hand. So that date for this year is January 1st, 2024. So just over 1 year ago. We're reflecting market activity up to that point based on what physically sat on that property as of 1 month ago. So I always think 1 year 1 month. So December 1st is the cutoff for physical changes to property. So if you were constructing a property last fall, that property was completed at December 1st, you're going to be assessed for the full value of that property. If the property was partially completed at December 1st, you'd only have a partial value on there. The remainder would be added, we presume, the following year, assuming completion. So I'll not spend a lot of time on this slide, but this is just discussing our roll quality standards. So we do use advanced statistical analysis to conduct an in-depth examination of market trends and indicators for every assessment roll. And our assessments are tested in compliance with both the Nova Scotia Assessment Act and industry standards set out by the IAAO, that's the International Association of Assessing Officers. This is always a popular slide, so I'll try to spend a little more time here. We may get some questions on this one, I would imagine. PVSC administers the capped assessment program on behalf of the Nova Scotia government, Section 45A of the Assessment Act. This program places a cap on the amount of taxable assessment for eligible residential property and how much it can increase year over year based on the Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index. So CAP is tied directly to the Nova Scotia CPI. You can see that right here in the orange bubble, the CPI for 2025, so for the assessment notices that were just mailed on Monday, is 1.5%. Last year it was 3.2%. So what that means in practical terms is that everyone who was capped last year will see a smaller increase to their cap than they saw last year, all things remaining equal. So that's assuming that there's no physical changes to the property that would also allow us to adjust the cap for those physical changes. We have a sample of a 2024 assessment roll notice here. So this would be last year's, but this year will look very similar. There's typically 5 columns in the notice. The first one is your classification. So that allows the municipality to know which tax rate they're billing. A commercial property would have a different tax rate. You'd see commercial taxable on there. Your assessed value. So this number reflects what I was talking about in the previous slide, your market value based on the market 1 year ago and the physical state of your property 1 month ago. Your capped assessment here does not necessarily have a relationship between what your property's worth or how much we feel the market has moved year over year. What it's based on is whatever your cap was in the previous year, plus the Nova Scotia Consumer Price Index, and potentially an adjustment for physical changes. So if you add a detached garage to your home, that's going to be added to your cap as well. That comes after the Consumer Price Index is added. The final number here is just the lower of these two numbers. So in this scenario, we don't know any more about this property other than what's displayed here on the screen. But because 153,000 is the lower of the two numbers, this property is eligible for a capped assessment, we presume, based on the other requirements. The taxable is the lower of the two numbers. That's the number that's provided to the municipality as a taxable assessment. That's really important from a council perspective and from a budgetary perspective, because you'll see in the upcoming slides that number sort of tempers the assessment lift year over year. So even if the market is moving in excess of 1.5%, the majority of the residential file is being adjusted by that 1.5% figure. So that sort of changes the relationship year over year with taxable assessment and residential assessment total. So a little bit of detail on West Hants specifically. Just gonna move over because I have some notes here. So your total assessment roll in West Hants, 3.2 billion overall. The vast majority of that is residential property assessment. So 2.9 billion in total assessed value. That reflects a 12.9% increase year over year from last year. The residential lift with cap is a little bit less. I'll cover this in a little bit more detail in a moment. You have 13,348 accounts, which interestingly enough, I just doing the math on the 650,000, it's about 2% of the assessment accounts in the province. Residential assessed value with cap is 2.1 billion. So that reflects an 8.4% lift from last year. And those are sort of the two different numbers that reflect the impact that cap has on taxable assessment. So while the residential lift is 12.9%, so that's physical changes and market changes on assessed value, the taxable lift is 8.4%. That's being tempered by that 1.5% CPI. So while some properties are moving with the market, properties eligible for cap are not moving with the market. They're moving at 1.5%. So that sort of brings that number down and reduces the amount of taxable dollars available to the municipality. The province-wide number is very close at 7.17 versus 8.4% in West Hants. And percentage of dwellings that are capped are 88% this year in West Hants. And this is relatively typical, consistent with what we see in other municipalities. And it's actually exactly the same as last year. So indicating that there's not a whole lot of difference. Often the larger the difference between the market lift and the CPI, we often see more properties come on. And as the market flattens, we see some properties come off because not as many properties are benefiting from cap, all things remaining equal. On the commercial side, we've seen a relatively flat market, so almost no change year over year. We have 286, just over 286 million in total assessed value, over 770 accounts in West Hants. So certainly an important component of the file, but the minority of sort of assessment dollars in this region. And some details. So a little bit more detail on the 2025 assessment roll. So we had 501 new building permits in West Hants that were reviewed by our assessors. What we typically do is review that permit description and value that we receive from the municipality, determine if an inspection is needed, and go forward with inspections. We completed over 12,000 property inspections province-wide last year. We reviewed 551 property transactions. So these are transactions that were determined to be market and were used to allow us to sort of measure the lift in the market year over year. These would be property transactions that occurred in 2023, so up to 1 year prior to this year. We also received 262 appeals in 2024. I looked at that against the total number of accounts, just around 14,000 in West Hants. You're less than 2%, which is again relatively consistent with the province. So less than 2% of properties are appealed, and the vast majority of those appeals are now completed. We will begin another appeal period as of yesterday. So moving on to the appeal process, this is a great bit of timing for folks in the room. If you're talking to your constituents who are considering an appeal, we always recommend give us a call first, of course. But each property owner receives a notice of assessment which indicates their new assessed value and cap if they are eligible. Should a property owner disagree, they have until February 13th, so 31 days from the date that the notices are mailed, to send us in an assessment appeal. Those can come by mail or by email. So you just have to send us a signed appeal form. That's the back of your assessment notice. And instructions on how to file an appeal are included on the notice. There are 3 levels of appeal. So you initiate the first level by sending in that form, that signed appeal document. The next level, should you continue to be dissatisfied with the results of that appeal, is the Nova Scotia Assessment Appeal Tribunal. The third level is the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. So our contact information is here. So should you have any questions from constituents around property assessment, please direct them to our contact center where they can connect with assessors on the phone. So we typically have about 55 assessors province-wide available on the phone daily throughout what we call the inquiry period. So that 31-day appeal period to answer questions. And we're happy to talk with property owners about whether an appeal is appropriate. And we don't do that to dissuade folks from appealing, but often a description of why things have changed or what's changed and sort of the math behind it. Often we can come to an agreement and avoid that appeal process, which is a little bit more formal. So our contact information is there. It's also available on our website at pvsc.ca, and we receive emails directly at inquiry@pvsc.ca. All of that information is on all of the assessment notices as well. So I think I got through it with 3 minutes for questions. So thanks very much, everyone. And I'll open up the floor to any questions from the councillors.
Thank you, Rod. So councillors, Councillor Leary Pinch.
Through you, Chair. Of the 262 appeals that you received out of curiosity, what are their outcomes?
So how many get adjusted? So typically last year, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but over the past couple of years, we've trended between about 18 and 22% adjustment. So roughly a third, and that's consistent province-wide as well. So typically, and what that reflects is a couple of different things. So there's a little bit more detail in those numbers, but really it's many appeals are withdrawn as well. So what we typically see is a third withdrawn, a third amended, and a third confirmed, which means we're not changing anything at that point. So the property owner still has the ability to continue that appeal should they continue to disagree within 14 days. But there's a significant number of withdrawals as well, which is really, I like to see that number dropping a little bit because it means folks are calling us. So often a withdrawal is someone has received their notice and they say, oh, I'm going to appeal this because I don't understand it. They send it that appeal. Another option is just give us a call. And the other thing we encourage is property owners can call us at any time during the year, and we can make prospective changes without that formalized appeal process. So if you've removed a building this week from your property, or you've had a structure fire, let's say, or something has changed on your property, you want to let us know, we're happy to reflect that for next December 1st. We're working on that assessment roll now. So we can always have those prospective conversations as well, but it's about a third, to answer your question.
Any other questions?
Just to add a little bit, Madam Chair, if I can, on the appeal side. I gave a presentation in Wolfville this morning, and they asked a question which I thought might be of interest of interest to you as well. They asked the question, what are the pitfalls to appealing? Are there any? And I thought about it for a second. I said, well, there's no fee related to appealing. Anyone can appeal under the legislation. It's not hard to appeal because you have your appeal notice right there. And then, of course, I didn't, right at that time, I didn't click in, but she said, no, but do you ever put the values up on appeal when someone appeals it? So kind of interested to let you know that it would be rare that we do on appeal. But if we find something blatant, someone appeals and finds something blatant, like they, put another building on their property or something, we do fix it for the next year. So pitfalls didn't really strike my mind as being when they first asked the question, but when I found out what they were getting at is, and Rod, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not, but typically.
I think all I would add, everything Paul said is correct, and I absolutely agree with, but I think it actually ties in a little bit to my comment on withdrawals around. Often I've found in talking with thousands of property owners over the years is that oftentimes property owners are very focused on the year over year change, looking at, and it's important to remember that we have the best information we have each year. And also, if you've changed something on your property, that often will necessitate a change in assessment and a change in your cap. That's when it's an opportunity to give us a call. So let us know what's changed, and we can have that conversation, explain why there may have been a significant change to your assessment. If you still disagree, we can go through that process. But oftentimes, in the very rare instance where we've had to make a change or make an increase on an appeal, it's often because there's been a significant physical change to the property. We're assessing something that wasn't previously assessed. We continue to be accurate. We've confirmed that all of those things are located. All of that physical data is correct on the property. And we're looking at it and saying, okay, sometimes we'll realize that there's additional physical data missing that is not currently assessed. Property owners can always check that for themselves by using our PIN report feature as well on the website. So you can have a look at what is assessed to your property in terms of buildings and make sure that that's correct. And that's sort of a self-serve service that we provide to audit our data and make sure that everything's correct. But I'll just answer to say that assessors, when they're talking with property owners, typically we're going to confirm that physical data. And if there was something that was significant that was missing from the property, we often would encourage either a withdrawal of the appeal with a change for the following year, or in a rare instance, an increase. But again, as Paul mentioned, it's very, very rare. It's not something we're seeking to do, certainly.
Great. Thank you. Councillor John Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Francis. And thanks, Rod and Paul, for the presentation. It's very informative. One last question. You mentioned that if there was a fire, you could, people could get in touch with PVSE and report that, and the assessment would go down. And I would assume that's the same as for floods. And I'm wondering, when we had a lot of floods 2 summers ago, did people report that? And do you know if our assessments went down because of that?
So that's a great question, Councillor Smith, and thank you. So I'd answer 2 ways. The first would be physical data that is not correct. We're always happy to change for a prospective assessment roll and potentially on an appeal, depending on when that physical data happened. So if my house is damaged by fire tonight, the existing assessment roll can't be changed because it reflects December 1st. It remains correct. However, we would, of course, remove that dwelling for the following year. If a property was damaged, water damage due to flooding, for instance, and that wasn't something that was already reflected on the assessment roll, we would absolutely be more than happy to make that change, and certainly would encourage property owners to get in touch with us to let us know if that's happened, because in the absence of a building permit, an appeal, or a call from a property owner, it's very difficult for us to know. And flooding is the most difficult because often the damage is reflected inside the home where we're not able to see it from the outside. Fire is a little bit more obvious, if that makes sense. So hopefully that answers your question. With flooding, I've been involved. Many of you may have seen me at some of the meetings last year around flooding here in Windsor and in Hansford as well. We continue to have an adjustment applied in the Stannis Street area specifically for market related to flood. So actually saying that, we see a reduced value for this group of properties specifically. And so that's sort of a separate adjustment that's been applied en masse or consistently throughout an area where it's been identified that there's an issue, if that makes sense. So there's sort of two components to an adjustment. One is to adjust the physical data, make sure it's correct. The other is to look at the market and say, is this reasonable?
Thanks. That's very helpful.
Great.
Any other questions, council? Councillor Ivey.
Hey, thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. Just a few points of clarity, if I could. I'll go back to when you were talking about assessed value. First, if I could, assessed value reflects a year ago's value, but the state of the property is based on the state date, December. Is that correct? Like a month ago, did I hear you?
December 1st.
December 1st. So that's that. So if somebody appeals and you find that their appeal is valid, that they flooded last summer, for example, but the assessment was still done based on the state date of December 1st. Speaking, I'm not going to jump back a year, just last December is what I'll say. And you found that their appeal was worthy, that there had been sufficient damage from flood or fire. Do you adjust that assessment value for the current, or is it already done? It would be next year's automatically.
So as long as it occurred before December 1st, it would be for the current. So I think of a fire, but a flood would be exactly the same. So imagine a property was physically damaged due to flooding, and that damage was present on the property at December 1st. So if it occurred any time before December 1st, was not repaired, we weren't aware of it, it's not currently reflected on the assessment,
right,
we would make an adjustment under appeal or potentially with an inquiry from a property owner for incorrect data. If that damage occurred after, so we often see unfortunately structure fire activity in the month of December, for instance.
Right.
And there's a couple of things that can happen there that we work in conjunction with our municipalities with as well around what we call a revised opinion of value. But from an assessment perspective specifically, that would affect the following year's assessment roll. And the reverse happens with a demolition. So, or with new construction. So if you start building a home on December 15th and you are able to work incredibly fast and that home is done by the end of January or something, that home is not assessed until 1 year from the following April because of the state date. There has to be that cutoff, and that's what allows sort of a stable base of taxable dollars to be able to determine the municipal budget, of course. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does actually. It's really good. And then the only other follow-up is again to a comment that you had made, and perhaps my hearing may be off tonight. I wasn't swimming or anything to cause that, but the thing is, you were talking about the previous year's assessment value. Look, and I've lost it. I'll let it go. Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah. Councillor Larry Pinch.
You, Chair. I was just going to clarify because I noticed when Jim was saying that they could file an appeal if they had flooding previous to December 1st. Should they automatically follow the instructions for an appeal, or should they call you first?
Call.
Yes.
I would say absolutely call, as long as it's within that 31-day appeal period. So if you delayed calling until February 13th at noon, I would get the appeal in so that you have a valid appeal. We can always withdraw an appeal based on a conversation with the property owner and the appeal goes away. That's a third of appeals almost are settled that way. But it's preferable to always have that advanced conversation, just have that informal conversation with the property owner to determine if it's appropriate. And it's not to dissuade appeals. It's just to be able to have an information sharing between parties and make sure that everyone's on the same page.
I would say also that if in doubt, encourage them as well to say, look, if you can't get through for whatever reason, or you're not quite clear on the answer when you've talked to somebody, it doesn't hurt to appeal.
Okay, Mayor Zabian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through you to the gentleman here. Rod, if somebody goes through a bit of a fire and or flood and they have severe damage, but they reconstruct, they rebuild, they're going to be assessed at the new value of a new construction, rather, as opposed to the old value of an older property, correct?
Correct.
Just a question on the wildfires that we had previous with the news coming out that if anybody rebuilds, they're going to be assessed at the old value as if the house had not burnt down. Was that a provincially legislated change or?
Correct. Yes. So great question, and I'm glad to be able to answer it. It would have been a bit more difficult last week prior to the media on the recent decision. So we've received an additional regulation under Section 45A from the provincial government. So a directive through the Office of the Minister to provide relief for property owners affected by the wildfires by applying their 2023 capped assessment plus the consumer price index for the 2 intervening years. So if it was 100,000 back in 2023, you'd have plus 3.2 plus 1.5, you land around 106,000, assuming everything is the same. One of the provisions within that regulation was that up to 25% increase in square footage was allowed. Outside of that, there will be some adjustments or sort of for additional physical data. So something like a structure that didn't previously exist at all. So your insurance settlement allowed you to construct a large detached garage that didn't exist previously on the property. You're not replacing a garage, you're adding something that wasn't there. That would get a cap construction adjustment. We would add something. But again, as has always been the case, all of those properties will continue to be capped. And certainly we're working right now to apply that new regulation and make sure that we're able to get notices out to the affected property owners as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Ivey?
Yeah, thank you. So it came back. Did you say that there'd already been an area adjusted rate for the Stannis area? Is that
Correct.
Did I hear you correctly on
Yes. Yeah. So that remains in effect. So it was in effect for the 2024 roll as well. We brought a couple of more properties into that file as a result of dialogue that we'd had with West Hants around imagery that was provided for the area. We've got 42 properties in that area that are adjusted. So that's a 15% adjustment. And property owners within that area will get a letter from us indicating a brief description of that adjustment and how it works as well. A really important caveat is that our ability within the Assessment Act is to adjust assessments. So these are 15% adjustments to assessed value to reflect differences we're seeing in the market in that area due to stigma related to the flooding issue. So that doesn't necessarily subtract from a capped assessment the same way. So if your capped assessment, if you have a larger than 15% advantage relative to your assessed value, you may see no change to your taxable assessment because we're not able to adjust the cap the same way. The legislation doesn't allow it. So I think that's really an important caveat around we're reflecting it within the numbers we have control over, but it may not directly provide a change in taxable assessment for property owners. Depending on their cap situation, each property is totally different.
You're adjusting it, just to be clear, on the market-based assessment value.
Correct.
And for anybody with greater than a 15% cap advantage.
Speaking in general terms.
In general terms.
So if you have $100,000, keeping it at a low number, you have $100,000 assessment, it's now 85,000. So if your cap was 95,000, your taxable will be 85 and you have a $10,000 advantage. But if your cap was 75,000, it's still the lower of the two numbers, remains more to your advantage to pay on that number. So your taxable remains 75,000. Does that make sense? So the reduction is not reaching you because you already have the advantage of the cap. And the legislation is absent on natural disaster with the exception of the recent regulations surrounding Hammonds Plains. However, that regulation is very specific to a specific list of properties in Hammonds Plains.
Understood. And I understand the thinking behind the methodology. It's the challenges, as you see, whether it's wildfires or whether it's flooding or whatever the disaster may be, that if your home was damaged, even if it had a value of $75,000 and what you have to pay just to get it back to where it's at, you're still out significantly because of that. And ideally, insurance kicked in some fashion to be able to offset that. But
That's correct. Yeah. So it sort of brought attention to a very unique situation. This situation has always existed with regard to sort of a one-off structure fire, as often occurs, throughout the province with some regularity, unfortunately. But the fact that there was over 150 properties in one area destroyed, it certainly brought some attention to this issue, I think, and we're certainly happy to apply the provisions of the new regulation on behalf of the province.
thank you. Just my closing comment, Chair, is that because we've had conversation about this in the last month, in fact, and had guidance on the fact that legislation is the best way to approach it for people that experience this. But whether it's 150 homes in a single area, which brings attention to it, the pain incurred by those people is still the same.
Absolutely.
And that it's a sensible type of legislation, frankly, that people that have already been undermined in their living accommodations and conditions because of a natural disaster, whether it's fire by any means or flood by any means and so on, that it's something that the province maybe would be well suited to look at on a broader basis, that we aren't hitting them twice, 3 times, when they're already down. So thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no more lights, you're off the hook. So thanks, Paul and Rod, for the presentation, and we'll see you probably again next year.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for the questions and thanks for your time.
Okay, council, we're moving to 8, so we're going to go in camera for MGA 22-2A land matters. So I'm looking for a motion to go in camera.
So moved.
Second.
Councillor Paul Morton and Councillor Larry Pinch. All those in favor will just show us hands. Great.